We dive into studs and duds from Baltimore Ravens mandatory minicamp with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back. It is a Tuesday episode, and we're back with our Taco Tuesday guest and Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, it was a pretty crazy week last week. Some moves being made, mandatory minicamp starting and ending. How you doing?
Doing quite well. It is officially vacation time for the players. It's vacation time for me. I just got back from a little beach excursion myself. So it's time for them to go relax a little bit, fine-tune some things in the meantime, and then hit the ground rolling with training camp. So football is almost here. We don't quite have that distinct smell of the thick, humid August air and the fresh cut grass that really gets you going, but we'll be there shortly.
Yeah, we're getting close. It's an exciting feeling. But Spencer, the Ravens making a couple moves over the course of last week. And I know we had talked about Derek Wolfe multiple times over the past couple of weeks, but now we have an official answer on the situation. And that is that the Ravens and Wolfe reached an injury settlement. And we had talked about, what the defensive line depth looked like with and without Wolfe. Now it's going to be without him. But was the injury settlement like the best case thing that could have happened for both the Ravens and for Wolfe? I know if the Ravens had cut Wolfe, he wouldn't have saved them any money. And I don't know what team would have maybe taken a flyer on him with a trade. So did you expect this to happen? And was this the best case for them?
Yeah, it felt like the Ravens weren't really factoring him in as much. They go draft Travis Jones. You've got Medivh. You've got a Broderick Washington. You have Michael Pierce in the fold. Calais Campbell's there. So felt like, things got weird. Wolfe ends up, missing out last year. Felt like he was very vocal about having some disdain towards COVID protocols in the NFL, things like that. He's injured, ends up hunting all the time and doing strange things and has surgeries at weird times and things of that nature. So just a weird situation. Wolfe had a really nice initial year, was a good free agent signing, was one of the best run defenders in football, and really helped them go win that first playoff game of the Lamar Jackson era against the Titans, in part with Calais Campbell and Pernell McPhee, who up front really carried them at times. Wolfe did have a little bit of a breakdown in the regular season against the Titans after a strong game in overtime. Took some credit there, or I guess took the accountability there after that game, and then came back and got it done in the playoffs. So was a nice stint in that regard. But at the end of the day, if he's not loving COVID situations and not feeling great about his hip and his back and things of that nature, then at the end of the day, the best thing was to let the younger guys go get their shot and go see what you've got in guys like Travis Jones, guys like Broderick Washington, and allow Justin Medivh to continue stepping into the limelight.
Yeah, it did feel very mysterious. And now the situation is done with. It's over with. Wolfe no longer a part of the Ravens. And I still feel pretty confident in that depth, I'd say. I mean, even without Wolfe on it, they've done a good job of building it up both with young guys and with veterans. And I think that balance also helped them out a ton. But Spencer, then on Thursday, we had the long-awaited Lamar Jackson press conference. And there were a lot of questions about his contract. Also some other things in there, too, about the Marquise Brown trade, Tyler Linderbaum, et cetera. But did you take anything away from that, either contractually or not from him?
I guess the big takeaway was that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are having conversations, which almost felt like someone on the stand for something that pleads the fifth over and over and over again. We're having conversations. We're having conversations. We're having conversations. He's bigger than he's been before. Gained some weight. I don't think that weight's going to stick on him myself, but wasn't anything too crazy. He's going to go work at Florida Atlantic with Rashad Bateman, James Prochet, and whomever else is free to join. So I don't think we got anything too crazy, but at the end of the day, the Ravens have had conversations with Lamar regarding his contract, and that's just the big takeaway. He kind of pled the fifth in that sense quite a few times, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, it did almost feel like a "I'm just here so I won't get fined" type answer where it was over and over again. But yes, the Ravens and Jackson have had conversations. He said that maybe just once or twice. But Spencer, then the Ravens on Friday signed Steven Means, the linebacker, someone who was familiar with Baltimore, spent parts of 2014 and 2015 with the organization. The Ravens have had a need for some veteran outside linebacker depth, and Means is someone who hasn't had a ton of production, but is someone who I think is highly regarded and tried out with the Ravens during minicamp, impressed the coaches enough. And you know what? He was able to latch on with the team. What do you think about this signing? And should this maybe not let them be like, all right, we're going to sign another guy? Should this be the only addition they make, or should they also still continue to be looking at guys like Justin Houston and Jason Pierre-Paul?
Yeah, so Means stepped into a starter role for the first time at around 30 years old in Atlanta, and I think is, at best a rotational kind of veteran that can come in, and I think he's kind of that quadruple A type player that if some injuries happen, you're glad that you brought him in, you're glad that you had him around, and he's familiar with the system. So I could see him maybe coming and going throughout the course of the year, being, maybe on the practice squad and then elevated when they need him, things like that. But I don't think he ultimately precludes the Ravens from bringing back Justin Houston, who, again, if he's playing football, it feels like he is playing football. I think we might have heard a little bit of a rumble from him in that sense of his career if he weren't going to. So I think that's still the move and where the Ravens end up.
Yeah, and for him, he's a player that the tender would be around 2.5 million to bring him back. I think that is a bargain for what Houston brought on the field. So I think Means is a great depth piece. And you talked about it, maybe someone who is on the practice squad and gets elevated, but I don't think that he should discourage the Ravens from bringing back Houston or bringing in Pierre-Paul. But Spencer, with the uncertainty surrounding David Ojabo and Tyus Bowser with their Achilles injuries, I mean, how confident are you with their depth as it stood? So let's say that, cut down day was tomorrow. They had to go into the season. I mean, with Odafe Owe, Dalen Hayes, Jalen Ferguson, you have Vince Beagle in there, Means. I mean, how confident are you in that depth right now?
Not terribly. I think a lot really rides on David Ojabo to return, or excuse me, not David Ojabo, Odafe Owe to return to form and be the penultimate piece in Mike Macdonald's front. And if that doesn't happen, it's, I think, a little impractical to expect Tyus Bowser to return quickly and return right back to form and be able to take on a heavy workload. You've got David Ojabo, who probably isn't going to be able to get into real football shape until October, November, December, if he even can this season. Going to be a tough uphill battle for him. Dalen Hayes, who I think is really, really talented and was a steal of a pick, but at the end of the day, he really has only played one full season of football due to various injuries dating back, I think, 6 years. Was at Notre Dame for such a long time until he could finally get in a good, healthy season and shows that he's an NFL player. So I think that Odafe Owe is really carrying a lot of weight in that position room. And if he is unable to return and be, taking a next step, taking a next stride, I think this group really struggles. So that's why I do think Justin Houston's imperative, especially to be able to give Tyus Bowser the opportunity to recover and work his way back naturally, be able to stay healthy once he gets healthy, things like that. Tyus Bowser is a super freak athlete, so he should be able to. Guys like Vince Beagle, again, I feel like a little bit of a quadruple A player, similar to Means. And then the one guy who's got some opportunity here is Jalen Ferguson, who is in a contract year, does need to prove that he is worthy of getting, that $5 million deal somewhere else next year if it's not here. And apparently is reported to camp very lean. I don't think that fits what type of player he was coming out of college. So really having to go to a place where he's asked to remake his body and play a position that he was a little out of tune in. And maybe it's a little bit better of a fit in Mike Macdonald's defense. And the one guy, I guess, that was more of the previous segment, but we did forget about too, Brent Urban also is an easy replacement for Derek Wolfe, tying that back. But Jalen Ferguson has all the opportunity in the world. He's going to probably get a ton of reps in camp and have every opportunity to go get some first-team reps, a ton of second-team reps, and prove that he should get a shot. We're going to talk about some other guys later, but Jeremiah Moon, an intriguing name here. Malik Harrison, another guy to watch out for that could potentially end up getting a little bit more of those, especially early down, strong side, outside linebacker end looks. Someone who can shock and shed and play the run well. Was asked to do that, I think, 90-ish times as a rookie and held his own there. So it, I guess, is a I guess the question is it a deep room? I don't know if it's a deep room talent-wise, but they've got a lot of NFL bodies in there. So it's a weird room right now, and I do think they really need to make an addition still.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think again, Justin Houston would be my 1A choice, but Pierre Paul would not be a bad one at this point. They definitely kick the tires there just to see what they have potentially and to just get that rolling. But Spencer, you mentioned Odafe Owe, and it kind of got me thinking because with Bowser potentially not being able to come back for Week 1, he is by far and away the number 1 outside linebacker on this team at the moment. So what are your expectations for him? Do you feel like he can bounce back in that way? Obviously, he had a scorching start to his rookie season, kind of tapered off a little bit, missed the final 2 games. I mean, what do you think of him heading into his second season?
Yeah, I think the sky is the limit. He can make plays in space. He needs to show that he has an understanding of how to translate pressure into sacks a little bit better, but sacks are inconsistent. If it wasn't for Micah Parsons getting put into the outside linebacker role, the defensive end role in Dallas, then he probably would have finished with the best stats of anybody. He did. He had a ton of pressures, did make plays, did sustain an injury at the end of the year as well. So I think that with his athleticism, with the nuance that he showed as he's developing, the things he can do as a run defender on either side, whether it's weak or strong, what he can do in pursuit in space is really freaky. So I think that he certainly can continue to shine and hopefully gives Ravens fans that 10 sack pass rusher that they've wanted for quite some time.
Yeah, he certainly does have that upside. I'm really excited to see what he can do in his second season with a full offseason under his belt, being able to have recovered from that injury. And with some guys on the defensive line, I think can help him out a lot. So I'm excited for Odafe Owe. But we'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. When we get back, we'll be diving into studs and duds from Ravens minicamp on the offensive side of the ball. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose a diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft a perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. And if you're looking for fine jewelry but are having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or even chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast is exclusive, includes engagement, so use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Olshecker still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, mandatory minicamp in the books Tuesday through Thursday. Last week, we heard a lot of good things about a lot of good players, and I wanted to dive into studs and duds first here on the offensive side of the ball. And there were guys who I think it looked maybe a little bit excited to hear them making plays and getting their names out there. Who were some guys on offense that you were excited to hear about making plays?
Definitely Isaiah Likely, definitely Charlie Kohler, definitely Tyler Beatty, all three guys that are, day 3 guys as rookies coming in and what much needed help in the passing game. And to hear Likely being a consistent red zone threat, hear him be, someone that Lamar Jackson speaks highly of quickly, goes a long way, especially in minicamp. If that's someone that Lamar Jackson gets excited with, probably a higher chance that he's going to trust him and trust him to go be a reliable target. So hearing his name a ton was really pleasing. Of course, Mark Andrews continues to. Sounds like, Daniel Falele has a lot of work to do, but they were super impressed with his movement skill at his size as they're continuing to work with him. So all those guys on the offensive side of the football, it sounds like James Prochet, picked up where he left off from training camp of last year and practices of last year, just bringing professionalism and intensity and things of that nature. And it sounds like Benjamin Victor is someone who's going to push to make this team, especially if they don't sign a veteran. So I think all of those guys, it was nice to hear that they're ultimately ready to make plays in the passing game, and we're going to find out.
Yeah, and I know Likely is someone who a lot of, like myself included, a lot of people are very excited for, and he was making contested catches, making consistent plays, and you mentioned him being that red zone threat is something that's huge. I mean, did this do anything for you in terms of maybe envisioning what his role could be? I know it's still a little bit of a mystery based off of how versatile he is, but I mean, what kind of role could he play now that you've heard that, all right, he's making these plays in camp and he's proven himself?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone who does have maybe a little bit more of a lean frame, especially as a tight end. He was a really nice blocker in space at Coastal Carolina. Definitely wasn't quite the inline big body that can really go hunker down and bully a defensive end type player, especially now he's in the NFL, but he can go connect on some inside linebackers. He can go wall off safeties. He really did a good job against cornerbacks in space. So if he continues to go the leaner path, I think, sure, he's someone that you could go stick on the outside in an ISO situation on the backside of a play and ask to go win one-on-one against a cornerback on a slant or something like that a little bit. Definitely think he is going to get moved around. Maybe he's someone we see handed the football in some different iterations, as well as especially lined up in the slot. So I think there's going to be a ton of slot usage for him, as well as Charlie Kohler. I think that's where those guys are going to end up in some bunches and stacks and things of that nature. So I think that likely probably profiles as someone, while he didn't run the greatest 40 in the world, that might be able to lose a little bit of weight. Maybe he was trying to bulk up and be a tight end, and maybe that's not quite the way they want to use him initially. So if he's being asked to lean down some, get a little bit twitchier, get a little bit quicker, he definitely works over the middle of the field really, really well. And body control and things outside the numbers are a little bit different, but he did highlight that just a bit. So asking him to go win one-on-one against some DBs is something I'm very curious to see. And if he's someone that can do that, that might really be a nice player for the Ravens immediately this year as a rookie. While really you don't see a ton of tight ends ever have production as rookies. If you go look back at the all-time leaders, I think there's like maybe 6 or 7 that have gone for over 800 yards as a rookie. Kyle Pitts doing so last year, but at the end of the day, if you can go make plays in the pass game, do some different things, be versatile, be a little bit of a tight end plus, work that way, then you're going to probably find the football in your hands, especially in a thin receiver room that doesn't have a lot of big bodies. So I think he's going to have every opportunity to prove his versatility, prove that he's a pass catcher. And if you can use him a little bit like the Titans like to use Jonnu Smith, have him in the backfield, doing some things to get some funny alignments on him and get him the football in the red zone as well, then you might have a really successful player.
Yeah, and this offense, I think, fits him well, especially you mentioned he can play a bunch of different roles for them where he can slot in at multiple different positions. So I think for likely, he does have the potential to make a huge impact in his first year. But I think also, Spencer, you mentioned Tyler Beatty. He also has the potential to make a huge impact, especially depending on what happens with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. And, we had heard the fact that he was making plays and even in pass protection, making some plays there. I mean, if Dobbins and Edwards are forced to miss some time early on in the year, how confident are you that Beatty coming in as a rookie could pick up some of that slack and make an impact?
Yeah, I think we could see Beatty come take, 5-10 touches a game if needed. If guys end up on the PUP list, if they do have to roll with maybe Mike Davis and Beatty and sign another back, if that's the worst case scenario, then they're going to be asking Beatty to be explosive, make plays on special teams, go be able to be a factor on third down here and there, especially out of the backfield. And then take the ball on first and second down. If that's the case, if it's him and Mike Davis to start the year, he's going to have a ton of opportunity to prove that he can be a reliable NFL running back. He can be explosive and outplay his draft position there. So Beatty is someone that does have the movement skill set, does have enough sand in the pants to handle a decent amount of touches, it feels like, and be a little bit of a powerful runner, whereas it felt like Justice Hill kind of struggled with that a little bit. Maybe Justice Hill's a touch more of a home run hitter, but I think that Beatty can really go cut it up, really do some things in the pass game, and is going to be a fun player.
Yeah, and it feels like Spencer also his abilities as a receiver is a huge plus. And I know it kind of felt like we were going that direction a bit last year before the injuries to Dobbins and Edwards, where the team was talking up, oh yeah, this is going to be a big part of our offense. And now they're doing it again this year. So how much of an impact do you think Beatty's going to have as a receiver here as this Ravens offense potentially moves more into getting the ball into the running back's hands as pass catchers?
Yeah, again, it depends on J.K. Dobbins primarily, and then a little bit of Gus Edwards too, just in terms of overall snaps. But it feels like maybe J.K., based on from what I've heard, is a little bit further along in his rehab and might have a chance at rejoining, the end of camp and getting some touches in and being phased in a little bit. So Beatty as a pass catcher is going to be asked to really showcase what he can do in all those one-on-ones, in all of those split field, in all of those 7-on-7s and red zone drills and goal line drills and all of those things, to go be a violent mover that can create separation and have a feel for, a little bit of soft spots as well as finishing catches and being a consistent hands catcher. So all things that we've seen him do. He was used in the pass game there quite a bit. And I think that he's going to have every opportunity to prove that. If he can go do it, then it's going to be really fun to have someone you can feature out of the backfield, especially with those tight ends and Rashad Bateman and some other guys that are going to command a little bit of attention there. So Beatty can go factor in, maybe can split out wide a touch, play, 50, 75 snaps there, maybe make a couple catches and moonlight that way, then it'll go a long way in making sure that the Ravens have adequate pass catching weapons.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rashad Bateman, and is the big four, as I call them, with Bateman, Duvernay, Prochet, and Wallace. Those four, it seemed like each got a little bit of positive press in terms of what they were doing at minicamp. So, Spencer, what did that do for your excitement level for them and what they can do this year?
Definitely. It is just minicamp, though, so I do want to take it with a grain of salt, but want to see them continue that into training camp and consistency in the preseason, and then might be a little bit of a mojo jojo going on.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think the potential is there. And I know when you're looking at other rooms around the league, there's not that big star, big name recognition, but Bateman has that star potential. And I think that he can really, with this number one role, even if the Ravens bring in a veteran, I don't think that veteran is going to all of a sudden become this number one receiver for them. That's not what they're going to ask. So Bateman has that role locked up, in my opinion, and I'm excited for him as well as the other guys too. But Spencer, with the studs, I mean, do come the duds. Were there any guys who you thought you wish you would heard more about during training camp or mini camp here? Sorry.
It's tough with the offensive line when there's not contact or anything, but it did appear, or it was the case that Ben Powers was taking a lot of the first team reps at left guard, and I think that's quite interesting. Maybe Phillips still kind of working his way back to being fully healthy, things like that. Didn't hear a ton on Ben Cleveland or anything of the nature, but nothing really to write home about. Felt like Tyler Huntley maybe had a little bit of a rough go with an injury and maybe being a little bit inconsistent as well. We saw him light it up in training camp last year. Every day he was putting a ball in the end zone. Him and James Prochet had a really awesome connection throughout training camp, but felt like from all reports, everything I heard as well, that Huntley had a little bit of a tough time there. And Lamar came in and, felt like was throwing pretty well. So Huntley needs to, maybe go get a little bit more healthy, take a couple months off, come back and get ready to be the backup quarterback on a team that, needed him last year and would love to see him continue to sharpen himself, turn himself into an asset, and maybe go get that starting opportunity somewhere in the NFL at some point.
Yeah, Huntley was a player that did show flashes, also showed areas of improvement where he could improve. And obviously, I know the deep ball being one of them. And I think, with the tendonitis in the shoulder, maybe hindered him a little bit. So definitely getting healthy is the key for Huntley for sure. But we'll head into our final break here on Locked on Ravens. Still a ton to dive into in our final segment. We'll talk about defensive studs and duds from minicamp for the Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online. BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains your best source for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. As well as today, use a mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here with our final segment of Locked on Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Spencer Schultz talking about studs and duds from mandatory minicamp. Spencer, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Felt like there are a lot of players who were getting some praise and who we heard really good things about. Who are some of those guys that you heard and you were excited about based off of what you heard from minicamp?
I think Jeremiah Moon is one that I'm very excited about. Someone who played a little bit of a changing role throughout his time at Florida. And whenever I saw any tape of Florida as an opponent, Florida that I was watching in general, felt like he was someone who was making plays, was looking like an NFL player, did look better than his competition, but the consistency wasn't quite there. So if he's going to get asked to go be an edge player and play that way, he didn't have a ton of time there at Florida. I think it was mainly the last season and a half for him and really the second half of his final season. But sounds like he's someone that has a really strong ability to go crack the 53. And the Ravens love those guys. They love those opportunities. He is someone who I know for a fact is going to give it his all on special teams and work his way that way. Him and Zacoby Mclean are my best bets to be the UDFA that makes the 53. And, the streak did die, but it's only 1 year. And then they ended up having someone from the 53 or someone play on the 53 and be active anyway that was a UDFA as well. So Jeremiah Moon, definitely someone that sounded like they were very impressive. Kyle Hamilton, from all reports, looked immediately the part, which didn't surprise anyone who knows anything about him because his first snap, his first game at Notre Dame, he took a pick six to the house. So him having a fast start is nothing new. That has been who he is as long as he has been playing this sport. And so Kyle Hamilton certainly seems to be someone that's just going to ascend quickly and I think has a real shot to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. someone that will have the chance to get his hands on enough footballs and get some interceptions, maybe a couple sacks, maybe a couple tackle for losses, some PDs, all of those things that line up nicely with what the voters end up liking, as well as tackles, which is a stupid stat that we put way too much stock into, but typically those hold some weight. So if there's not someone that is a corner, if one of the Derek Stingley doesn't go have 7 interceptions, or if one of the pass rushers, if Aiden Hutchinson doesn't go have 13 sacks or something like that, I think Hamilton definitely has a really strong shot. So I'm excited to see what he can do, being that tight end body frame that can really go blanket those guys. And we saw him do that at Notre Dame, and seems to have a knack for the football as well. According to Sports Info Solutions, he did have the highest hand on ball percentage, meaning pass deflections, interceptions, recovered fumbles, anything where a player that is on defense gets their hand on the football, had the highest in the last 3 draft classes, I believe. So he really, really, really understands how to make impactful plays, and it sounds like he was in the right spot at the right time, picked that right up, and was ready to go.
Yeah, and it's so funny you mentioned Jeremiah Moon and Jacoby McLean. I did my 53-man roster predictions yesterday, and post minicamp, and my 2 undrafted guys who made the roster were Jeremiah Moon and Jacoby McLean. So we're on the same shirt. We're on the same wavelength today, Spencer. I'm telling you, but it's amazing. And I think that also when you're looking at some of these guys who stood out, I heard good things about Justin Medivh, someone who I know we have talked about before. And really, I think it's a big year for him. It's a really big year for all the 2019 draft class. We heard about batted passes. He had about 3 in a day, I think. But it's huge because the whole batted pass thing is something the Ravens can use to their advantage. They have some huge guys on their defensive line. Calais Campbell, 6'8". Brent Urban is 6'7". So, I mean, how important is it the Ravens to get their hands up, get those batted balls, and Justin Medivh to be one of the big guys doing it?
Yeah, length is something that the Ravens didn't have at one point in time. That's why I think the Michael Pierce signing was interesting. They tried to go with kind of the 2 fire hydrant look, as I like to call it, a couple years ago. Back in 2019, they had Pierce and Williams taking snaps together, with Williams taking snaps more at 3 tech at times, 2-eye, 3 tech, things like that. So them bringing him back was interesting, but Urban, definitely someone that has a ton of length and has made a knack of getting his hand on the football. Medivh has great timing for it. Super long, despite not maybe being the tallest guy in the world. Calais Campbell, of course, is like throwing over, a falcon with how tall and long he is too. So definitely a huge thing. And one thing that I really do want to see Justin Medivh work more at this season is not over rushing and staying capable of batting a pass, or staying even with a quarterback, or before even with a quarterback, where he can still be within reach and go force a quarterback to take a tough angle. He can chase pretty much any quarterback other than maybe, Kyle or Murray, maybe a Justin Fields, a Lamar, down in tight quarters. He really has that type of speed as a defensive lineman. I think he's someone that has the potential to be a $60-70 million second contract player, but he just doesn't quite know when to disengage or when to stay and let a quarterback kind of dictate how he rushes. I think he has an emerging, or I guess a sense of where the quarterback is that needs development still. And I think that's the one thing holding him back from maybe having some prolific numbers. So I definitely want to see him stay with the quarterback in front of him a lot more this year. That'll lead to more batted passes. That'll lead to more sack opportunities. That'll lead to him forcing, tough angles for quarterbacks and maybe throwing some balls away, or, putting some balls in the dirt, or making some tough throws. So all of those things are awesome. And to hear him getting his hand on the football, especially at a time where, you can't really be that physical. You can't go get sacks. You can't hit, you can't touch. So what are you going to do? Get your hands up, get it on the football. So it's good practice for the defensive line. That's what they should be focusing on, and it seems like they're succeeding from all reports.
Yeah, and again, big year for the 2019 draft class with Jalen Ferguson, big year for the 2020 draft class with Medivh and Patrick Queen and all those guys, but also with the 2021 draft class, Spencer, I know we talked about Dalen Hayes. He was someone who did stand out during minicamp. It felt like a lot of plays being made by him. We talked about him a bit earlier in the show, but I guess kind of another point about him. What would your ideal year from him be? I know we talked about that with Afe Owe, but what are you looking for from Dalen Hayes this year in terms of what you would want to see?
I mean, what do I want to see? I want to see him go play 600-700 snaps and be like an 8-sack guy that is really good against the run and can cover backs and tight ends like we saw in college. Is that attainable? Well, maybe. He has the talent for it. He has the frame for it. I think maybe, sounds like he could have pushed himself maybe a little bit harder last year, but probably wanted to tread carefully considering all of the injuries that he has sustained. So I think Dalen Hayes is a guy that should be a rotational player. He is talented enough. The issues, again, have just been health. So if he can get himself in a good state, whatever needs to happen, whatever trainers he needs to be with, dietitians he needs to be with, all of those things, where he can stay relatively healthy for, just 13, 14 games, which is a really tall task still. But if he can stay healthy that much, I think we see someone who can become a rotational player, play 350 to 450 snaps, be a 5-sack guy, be someone who you're trusting on first and second down at times to hold up against the run and go make plays. He has the athleticism. He has the frame. He has the ability in coverage. He can do a lot of things for you. So Dalen Hayes is going to have a chance. He's healthy considering where Tyus Bowser is, where David Ojabo is. They did, draft him. They tend to like to stick with their picks. He needs to probably go outshine a Jalen Ferguson. He probably is going to really need to show that he's more sprightly than a Vince Beagle or a Steven Means, and is younger and has some tread on the tires in that sense still. So I think there's a lot of competition for who can emerge as that third or fourth guy on that front. And I think that Hayes is more of what the Ravens want to be in terms of being a player that can make plays in space, can go run plays down at the sideline, can go chase down a receiver, that's starting to wiggle after a catch, things like that. The Ravens have drafted that way. Odafe Oweh does that very well. David Ojabo did that very well in Mike McDonald's defense. So it seems like the speed, the ability to cover a little bit, the versatility, they're all things they want, as opposed to someone like Jalen Ferguson, who you do not trust to go be in coverage, man-to-man coverage or anything like that. They asked him a few times and it didn't look good. So he's going to have the chance to emerge that way, play that more Sam role, especially as Tyus Bowser continues to recover from that Achilles.
Yeah, and I think for Hayes, he right now, well, depending on where you put him in, could be the number 2 outside linebacker, pure depth chart wise on this roster right now, with Odafe Oweh being one. And then depending on where you put Ferguson / Hayes, I mean, he's number 2 at this point based off of where Bowser is and where Ojabo is. I'm not factoring in those guys right now. So though Hayes has the opportunity for a big role in 2022, I'm expecting him to play well. But Spencer, there are always those fan favorites. And that guy right now is Pepe Williams, someone who was a 4th rounder of this team, has versatility, and also was a standout, made some plays throughout the course of minicamp. What do you feel like his ideal role is? The Ravens have a ton of depth at corner. Do they necessarily need him early on in the season, or is he more insurance, maybe a special teams type year for him?
Yeah, I could see it be a little bit more of a rotational role for him, a little bit more special teams. Would like to see him work his way into the rotation a bit, and I think he's going to have every opportunity to, but we still got a lot of training camp left, all of training camp left, all of the preseason for him to prove it.
Yeah, he's an exciting player, and I'm excited to see what they can do there. But Spencer, again, with the studs do come the duds, and on defense, are there any guys who you wish you heard more about?
Would have loved to hear a little bit more, I guess, about Travis Jones. But again, those trench players, they can't really do any sort of contact. So it's difficult to say in that sense. Would have loved to hear a little bit more about Jalen Armour-Davis. Would have loved to hear a little bit more about Amon Marshall, who finally made his appearance, but it's hard to knock him if he's finally getting on the field, and that's a win in that sense. Didn't hear a ton about Brandon Stevens either. Would like to see what's going on there, but it's just mini camp, so it's hard to look too much into it at that time. But right now, we hear that Patrick Queen is really taking himself seriously. Not sure how much that entails. I know he got beat a couple times, which does happen, but someone that you do want to hear is really starting to click and dominate. And I think that he's a player that is very dependent on confidence in himself, a little bit more than the average player, for instance. So I want to see him really have a confident offseason where he emerges week 1, which he did do last year. If you go back and watch the Las Vegas Raiders opening game, he was an impact player in that game. And then from there, he had a rough month and a half or so, and then was able to get his confidence back, work back into the kind of full-time starter role and stay on the field and make plays. So want to see him really look the part this offseason, or I guess this training camp period. Someone that has every opportunity to, again, another guy that could be a $50 million guy, $60 million guy, if he can prove the consistency. He has the athleticism. He has the demeanor, seems to have the trust of the staff in many ways. Did have his snaps restricted last year, but in this defense, it is a new defense. It's going to be a little bit different, but at the same time, he worked with Mike McDonald, and I think his role should be somewhat simplified, shouldn't be asked to do as many complicated things in terms of bluffing some of those things quite as much. We will see, as he was a disciple of Wink Martindale and did install the pressures in the 2019 season for Wink Martindale. So very curious to see what Mike Macdonald does with Patrick Queen, and feels like sky's the limit. I just want to see him prove it again.
Yeah, and minicamp does provide insights. I wouldn't say I put no stock into it, but again, we're not putting all the stock in the world into it. It is just minicamp in a sense. So once training camp hits the preseason, we'll get a much better idea of just where these guys are, where they could factor in and everything. But it's nice to hear some football-related stuff relating to the Ravens, guys making plays, going out there, and everything of this sort. But Spencer, I appreciate you hopping on. That's all I have for you here today on the show. What do you have going on in Baltimore Beatdown right now?
Right now, we're ranking all of the Ravens first round picks from 1996 through 2018. So the Lamar Jackson draft class, we are ranking them through that period just because it feels like it's been enough time where you can really start to put out a ranking on a player once they've finished their rookie contract. So we're going to be releasing those. I have a couple podcast episodes on the Baltimore Beatdown podcast coming out to match up with those articles as well. So you can find those on BaltimoreBeatdown.com. And from there, just trying to take it a little bit easy, maybe start looking at some guys like Odafe Oweh, going back and looking at their tape from last year and what we expect them to look like in Mike Macdonald's defense and things of that nature while we're taking a breather before training camp gets started. And we're going to have tons of content again. So some fun, light stuff, some light summer reading. We're going to have some evergreen content coming out as well about the 2000 Ravens as well on the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. So a couple light things, some evergreen things, things of that nature. And that's about all we're working on for now.
Yeah, be sure to check it all out. Again, the link to Spencer's Twitter and the podcast will be in the description below. And that ranking, it's really interesting. The Ravens have had a lot of great first-round picks, some other not so great first-round picks. So to be able to rank those, that's really exciting. So Spencer, again, thank you so much for hopping on here today. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back in tomorrow, we'll be answering your mailbag questions and diving into more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you here tomorrow.